it's all about feeding windows with these fish. Like you can fish all day, and have a handful of lazy follows, and then all of a sudden it's like a light switch gets flicked and they all become active, and you can catch 4 or 5 fish in a 2-hour period, and then the switch goes off again.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Today, our destination is Lac Seul, that's spelled S-E-U-L, in the town of Sioux Lookout in northwestern Ontario, Canada, the land of trophy muskie fishing. And our guest is expert guide and author Ben Beattie. Ben runs a guiding company called Ben Beattie Outdoors, where he specializes in muskie hunting. And he has a degree in environmental studies from the University of Waterloo and is a columnist with Ontario Out of Doors magazine. And he's written for several other magazines as well, such as Muskie Hunter and Hook magazine. And man, you should see the size of the fish he's holding on the cover of these magazines. They are impressive. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really glad to have you on here. So how big were those muskies on the cover of those magazines? They looked as big as you.
Yeah, they're, mid 50-inch fish. Nothing to sneeze at. Those are some big ones.
Man, I'll say, all in a day's work, huh?
Yeah, some on a good day.
Yeah, right. So, hey, tell me, what is the experience like catching one of those giant trophy muskie? Like, what kind of a fight does a muskie put up? It's got to be amazing.
Yeah, they're big fish and strong fish. With the modern equipment, it's really designed to minimize the time of the fight for a couple of reasons. One, the longer a muskie's on the line, the more time it has to get off. And two, you don't want a long fight. You want a short fight for the health of the fish. It makes for an easier release. But, the biggest, thrill of catching a muskie, in my opinion, it's not from the fight. It's just from the overall experience. Once that big fish goes in the net, there's nothing you can really compare that feeling to. And it's nothing short of an adrenaline rush, and that is what I think creates the addiction to muskie fishing. Once you catch a big one, the only way to replicate that feeling is to catch another big one. So you just want to keep going, and the addiction grows.
Yeah, that's great. Man, it sounds like a lot of fun. So early season right now, you're actually fishing for walleye, aren't you?
That's true. Yeah. Our muskie season here in northwestern Ontario opens on the 3rd Saturday in June. So my guide business, I guide for walleye from opening day, which is the 3rd Saturday in May, until July 1st. And after July 1st, I switch over to all muskie.
Pretty much all muskie then. Yeah. So where is Lac Seul?
Lac Seul, we're about 2.5 hours north of International Falls, Minnesota, which is where most of the clients would cross the border and then drive up to Sioux Lookout. Now, but Lac Seul is so big that Sioux Lookout kind of sits on the southeast corner of the lake. The lake itself is crescent shaped, and it's 100 miles from one end to the other.
Oh, wow.
In 16 years of guiding, I've never been to either end of the lake.
That's great.
That's just how big it is. So the east side of the lake where Sioux Lookout is, that's where the muskie's population is. And it's good walleye fishing on this side of the lake early in the season. So it really tailors well to my schedule of walleyes first and then muskies second.
I gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like an amazing fishery. It's a reservoir, correct?
It is. On the far west end of the town of Ear Falls, they built a hydro dam in the 1930s. And that brought the level up about 10 to 12 feet. So still to this day, there's, random dead trees seemingly growing out of the lake where they used to stand on dry land.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And this is pretty much all wilderness area, right? Like undeveloped shoreline?
Yeah, very much. There's very few private cabins on Lac Seul, like literally a handful. And there's even very few outfitters on Lac Seul proper. Most of the outfitters locally are on the lakes around town, Pelican Lake and Abram Lake. So when I fish Lac Seul, I'll trailer from town about 15 minutes to a boat launch to access Lac Seul.
Okay, I got you. So it's a drive-in lake, right? But so how are they protecting the integrity of the fishery? Usually those drive-in lakes might not be as good fishing, but it's phenomenal fishing here. What is it? All the regulations they're doing, or?
Yeah, they have a slot size on the walleye where you're not allowed possession of any fish between 18 to 21 inches. So that kind of guarantees a few year classes will be protected every year, and those are reproductive fish, so they're spawning. But I think just the overall size of the lake is what really helps. There's more lake and more fish than there are fishermen, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's a great situation then. So talk about the fishing opportunities in the general area. When I look on the map, it seems like there's more water than land up there.
It's true, yeah. If you ever are lucky enough to fly around here in a float plane, you'll have your head pinned to the window just looking down, and it's seemingly endless chains of lakes and rivers. It's really something to see. But Lac Seul, the main draw for Lac Seul, for sure, by far, is walleye fishing. It's well regarded as one of the best walleye fisheries anywhere in North America, and that's what the majority of fishermen come here for, is the walleye fishing.
Okay.
A good day, you can catch 200 walleyes, and when I'm guiding walleye, if we catch under 100, that's just kind of a ho-hum kind of day, So over the years, your repeat clients, they've had those 200 fish days. So even 100 fish day to some people who have been here a lot seems slow, which is kind of strange to say, but the lake really can spoil you as an angler.
Yeah, I'll take 100 fish day anywhere, right? That's some phenomenal fishing. How does Lac Seul compare to some of the other well-known musky lakes in the area, like Lake of the Woods? A lot of people go there.
Absolutely, right. Lake of the Woods and Lac Seul, they're both big lakes, multi-species lakes. Lac Seul is a little bit different in that the density of the muskie population is not as high. Like if you were to look at fish per acre, it's lower on Lac Seul, but the average fish here is bigger. So it's kind of a destination for people who aren't interested in catching a whole bunch of muskies, but they're more interested in having the shot at a truly big fish.
Wow. So they actually manage this lake for trophy muskie, don't they, with the slot limits and the no-kill?
Right, yes. Lac Seul is no possession of muskie. You're not allowed to keep one no matter what. And that's different from Lake of the Woods and Eagle. Modern muskie fishermen, I think it's very rare for anybody to harvest a fish for any reason. People are so educated now, into how precious of a resource they are, that I believe that catch and release is pretty well standard across the board.
Yeah. And so a trophy muskie, how big is a trophy muskie in your mind?
Most people have that, that magic number of 50 inches in their head of a trophy fish. So that's kind of, the goal, I guess you could say, is to catch a 50-incher. But, it's just a number, and you see it happen where you'll catch a big fish, you'll put it in the net, and everybody's so excited. And then you measure it, and it's 49 or 49 and a half. And somehow people can be a little bit disappointed, right? That it's not a 50. But it's still a big, beautiful fish. But there's that stigma around that number of 50 inches,
yeah,
that people are shooting for. And if it comes up a little bit short, there's somehow sometimes disappointment.
Right. Yeah, and I 49 inches sounds okay too, right? That's a monster, a fish of a lifetime, I would think, for a lot of people.
It is, yeah. They're big fish, and that experience of catching a big muskie is just something you don't forget.
And you were telling me when we were talking before the show that a big muskie like that might be 16 to 20 years old.
Yeah, that's research for this region has shown that muskies can reach 50 inches of length in as little as 16 years. And that's not to say every muskie will reach 50 inches. A certain fish, just might not have the genetics or something may have happened to it, younger in its life. And it will never reach 50 inches no matter how long it lives, while other fish,
Yeah.
Could attain lengths of, high 50s.
Yeah.
A lot of it's genetics, but, I think a really old fish in this fishery could live to be 30 plus years old.
Oh, that's neat. Can you tell if they're, other than size, can you tell if they're an old fish?
Yeah, there are some giveaways. Number one is just the size of its head is what kind of gives away the age of a fish. Like I've caught fish before, like one specific fish that really sticks out in my head. It was 48 inches long. I caught it in the fall, and the girth on it was incredible, but its head just looked so disproportionately small to the rest of its body that I believe it to be a young fish with huge potential.
Okay.
And sometimes, you catch 50 plus inch fish and the size of their head is just fantastically huge. And I think that those are older fish. And, the bigger they get too, the slower they grow, right? Like I've captured a handful of fish that I know for sure that I've captured before. And, once they get up to be, 48 inches plus, they're growing relatively slowly, less than half an inch a year.
Yeah. Do you tag those fish?
They're not tagged. No, there's just certain fish that might have a characteristic of a marking or an old scar or something that, usually through photo analysis, I'll be looking at old photos and I'll say, hey, that looks like a fish I caught right near here several years ago. When you go back and you compare the photos, and unmistakably it's the same fish that you've caught again.
Oh, that's awesome.
They're usually, interestingly enough, the more I learn about it and the more experiences I have where I identify a fish that's been recaptured, is that they're kind of homebodies. I've never recaptured one very far from where I captured it the first time.
Oh, that's interesting.
I know one fish that I've had in my net 3 times, and twice it was on the exact same spot.
They just go right back to the same place. So how big is the area that they live in, do you think?
I think they have different ranges, different home ranges at different times of the year. But, say like their prime summer range might be somewhere in the area of a handful of acres as a best guess. That's not to say that they might not up and wander for a couple days for whatever reason. Who knows what they actually do.
Right.
But I believe that their comfort range for any time of year is relatively small.
Yeah. They find a good spot and stick with it.
Yeah, exactly. I know for a fact that I've raised a fish on a spot and then caught that exact fish on the exact spot as much as a week later.
Oh my gosh. Slow learners in some regards, huh?
Right. Well, it's all about timing, like finding them is half the battle, and they follow out to the boat and they show them, they kind of reveal where they're hanging out, but finding them's half the battle, and then the rest of it is timing. It's just a matter of being on the right spot at the right time when that fish is ready to eat. And
no kidding.
It's all about feeding windows with these fish. Like you can fish all day, and have a handful of lazy follows, and then all of a sudden it's like a light switch gets flicked and they all become active, and you can catch 4 or 5 fish in a 2-hour period, and then the switch goes off again.
Oh, that's neat.
But they're all connected. They all feel the same things that trigger them to be active. I truly believe that all the fish in the lake, they respond to the same things, whether it's barometric pressure or that's a big one for sure. But they all feel it, and they all get active and inactive at the same time. It's remarkable.
Yeah, that's interesting. Where do muskies hang out? If I'm new to muskie fishing, what am I looking for?
Okay. Depends on the time of the year and also on the lake. Even, comparing Lac Seul to Lake of the Woods it's 2 totally different things. So, my experiences are on Lac Seul, and this lake, more than any other, these fish relate to weeds, especially in the prime summer months. If you're not fishing prime cabbage, then you're not looking in the right spots. It's not to say you won't catch some fish off spots that have no weeds, but if you're going to put all your eggs in a basket, it should be the basket with cabbage weeds, and there's lots of it in this lake, and that's what they relate to. So weeds are key, especially weeds adjacent to any other kind of structure, be it a sandbar or a reef or inside cup off a point, any other type of structure. And one thing I always tell people is that if you find a spot and if it looks fishy, it's probably fishy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can usually tell just the first time you roll up on a spot, and if you see a big patch of cabbage, and there's a reef on one side and deep water on the other, you just know it's a spot. It's just a matter of time until you encounter a fish. You'll get off the water and I'll talk to my other guide friends that, it's very common for them to say the same thing, oh yeah, we had great action, between 4:00 and 6:30, and then it just shut off. And, that'll be the same thing. It happens all the time. It's too common for it to be coincidence.
Yeah. And a muskie eats mostly other fish, right? But they'll eat what, frogs, ducks, muskrats? What else? What do they eat?
Yeah. I remember one time watching a red squirrel swim across a spot we were fishing for muskie, and I just said to the guys in my boat, "Watch this." The squirrel made it, so that I was pretty sure there wasn't a muskie hanging out there. Yeah, they'll eat small mammals and any kind of fish. They're an ambush predator and they're opportunistic.
Okay.
They like to lie in wait, expending very little energy until a meal presents itself, and then they explode on it.
They explode it. What do they hit it on the side and kind of knock it out and then turn it around and swallow it head first?
Yeah, that's the general consensus. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So Ben, what was your first experience coming to Lac Seul?
I started guiding on Lac Seul 16 years ago in the center basin, which is west of here at a lodge called Silver Water Wheel Lodge. And that was walleye, pike, and bass. There's really no muskie fishery in the central basin of the lake. So I worked there for 4 years. And then we moved to Seul Lookout, my wife and I. And that's when I started to fish for muskies.
Okay. Yeah. What were your first thoughts when you first started fishing Lac Seul, particularly when you got into maybe the East Basin when you were catching muskie?
Right. So we moved to Seul Lookout in the fall of 2008. And right away I met some guys who had been guiding at Moosehorn Lodge, where I eventually ended up working. And they took myself and another friend of mine out. And the very first time we went out, it was in early October, and we went out trolling and did a bit of casting too. And the first day, my friend Graham ended up catching a 50-inch muskie trolling, and that experience is something that I'll never forget. And it truly changed me as an angler. It was the power of that experience was undeniable, and instantly, I was hooked. And that was all it took. Was just, I didn't even catch the fish, right? I watched my buddy catch it, and
right.
You're literally vibrating with excitement when you see a fish that's hit the net. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And then maybe that's a good indication that you make a good guide if you get as much excitement out of watching somebody else catch a fish.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, especially with muskie fishing. I get just as excited netting one for someone else as I do when I get a chance to catch one.
Yeah.
The memories really bond people, the relationships that I form with clients. It's incredible, and a lot of repeat clients, you get to see people year after year, and they truly become friends. And, inevitably you'll have experiences of catching big fish, and that just really bonds you.
That's neat. Yeah. Like nothing else, right? That's really cool.
It's true.
So what kinds of trips do you offer? Probably different parts of the year, right?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, walleye trips in May and June, and muskie trips from July 1st until the lake freezes. Usually get frozen out in early to mid-November is kind of the end. Most of my muskie trips are 5-day trips.
Oh, wow.
Up to, I do a couple 7-day trips every year with groups. I'm fortunate that I get a lot of repeat clients, but guys, once they get a taste of what this lake can be, they want to come back year after year. So that's very fortunate for me and my business.
Okay. And when you're out for 5 days, are you coming back to the launch every night, or are you camping out somewhere?
No, we return to town, and my clients stay at Winona Lodge, which is just 5 minutes outside of Seul.
Okay. Gotcha.
We come back, we trailer the boat back every evening, and charge up the trolling motor, and everybody gets to sleep in a bed as opposed to a tent. But yeah, it's not that kind of a remote adventure, but we're not exactly roughing it.
Right. That's great. So you were telling me that you take anglers really who sometimes are brand new to muskie fishing. How has that played out?
Yeah, there's there's a lot of experienced fishermen that come to Lac Seul looking for that fish of a lifetime, but you also do get clients who it is their first time. And it's funny, it's almost like beginner's luck. I've seen, 3 times you can think of off the top of my head where people, it's, they're either very new to it or it truly is their first time, and they've caught a fish of a lifetime, like mid 50-inch class fish.
That's great.
Yeah, I always kind of relate it to like someone getting a hole in one the first time they ever play golf, right? And a lot of the time, they don't even know the significance of their catch, right?
Yeah.
And when I net a monster fish, I get really excited, like I'll be jumping up and down and hugging people and screaming. And I think that kind of tips them off to like, oh, wow, like I just did something.
Touchdown. Yeah.
Yeah, touchdown for sure. It's pretty neat to see, even experienced fishermen, when you get a really big fish in the net, even someone who's been doing it for a long time, they get super pumped up, and it's amazing to see that reaction and share that with people.
That's fun. That's really fun. Well, here we are in early June. A lot of the world is coming out of the shelter-in-place orders, but the border is still closed, right? And you get most of your business from the U.S. How is the coronavirus affecting you and your business?
Yeah, with the border closed, it's essentially shut me down. I would say over 90% of my clients come from the U.S. I've got a handful of Canadian groups on the books this year, but without the border, I'm basically ground to a halt here.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry. And they're thinking about reopening the end of June at this point, right?
Well, all we know right now is that the border will be closed until June 21st. They didn't give any indication that it would open then, so we just have to wait until they make another announcement. So there's really not even any way to plan ahead. It's kind of just a hurry up and wait situation. There's nothing you can do about it. Just try to remain optimistic that the border will open. And I know for a fact that when the border opens, the fishermen will be coming up the next day. People can't wait to get up here and get back to normal.
Yeah. Have you had a lot of cancellations?
No, that's the thing. Nobody's canceling. Everybody's just waiting to see what's going to happen, right? And if they can make it, they will.
Right.
That's been the attitude I've got from my clients is that if the border's open, I'll be there. And the only thing that's going to stop them from coming is the border being closed.
Right. And your early season walleye fishing was pretty much eliminated. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I've been going out with family and for the most part and doing a bit of fun fishing, which has been different, and, having this time, I've also dedicated some time to exploring new parts of Lac Seul, and learning new water, which is, having time to do that is under a normal year. You don't have as much time, but I've been able to dedicate some time to scout some entirely new parts of the lake. The size of Lac Seul, even though I've been on the lake full time for 16 years, there's still plenty of water that is new to me that's yet to be explored. So it's hard to scout new water when you're fishing with clients. Most clients want, they want your proven producing spots that, their best chance to catch fish.
Right.
That's not to say everybody's like that. I do have some groups who they really enjoy the thrill of exploring. and looking at new water and trying new spots. So I do get to do some scouting with clients, but for the most part, that's stuff that I do on my own time. And this year I've been able to get out and check out some new water. So I'm excited to try that once muskie season opens.
So a bit of a silver lining there. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just getting out more with my kids, they love it. They absolutely love it. So
good for you. Yeah. Those boys of yours, are they big fishermen?
Yeah, they're super into it, and
that's great.
It's great to see. They're at the age now too. They're 6 and 8, where they're a lot more capable now, and they can do it on their own. Like, we were out yesterday casting, and they were firing off bombs, and then it was just great to watch. They didn't need Dad's help very much, but we were casting for bass. But I told them they were casting for bass, but really what they were doing, they were training for muskie fishing.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. You just want to freeze them at that age too. That's a great age. Oh my goodness. So if you've been listening to the show, you know that we've got a Corona site for guides. It's called Help Fishing Guides Survive the Coronavirus. It's a GoFundMe site, and we're trying to raise money for all these guides who have lost a big chunk of their season and a lot of unknown going forward. So we know it's a difficult time for a lot of folks, and but there may be some of you out there that can support the guides, and we'd really appreciate and be very grateful for any help that you could provide. So just switching gears back to the fishing. So there's a lot of folklore surrounding muskie fishing, the fish of 10,000 casts, but what have you found? Is that a misnomer?
Yes and no, right? It's kind of a game where you're either a zero or a hero, and there's no in between. You can go out there and you can fish hard for a few days and not get the results you want. And there's other days where, you'll put 3 or 4 fish in the boat. It's all timing, like I mentioned, right? It's all about their mood and their activity level. And there's every day is like a clean slate. Whenever you hit the water, you can make best guesses on on conditions and things like that, but truly every day is you're starting over, you're trying to figure out what they're doing, what their activity level is. So it's unique in that, it's kind of, it does have a lot of similarities to big game hunting. Muskie fishing does.
Yeah.
You're looking for that one, incredible encounter, and that can make or break your day or your trip. I specifically remember a few years ago, I had a trip with a guy. It was early season, early July, and to be honest, it was a grind. It was a struggle. We caught a handful of fish, but we didn't really, light it up. And my very next 5-day trip literally started the day this guy left, and it was night and day difference. The fish were on fire, and I felt bad for the guy on the
right.
first trip, but the guy who was there, right after him had such a different experience. And we were fishing, similar water. Actually, I'd almost given up on this one area that's normally good that time of year, because we had such limited success there. And I remember saying to my client on the second trip, we're going to go in here one more time just to check. I just wanted to believe that it was going to work, even though it didn't for the 5 days before. And we ended up catching 7 out of the 10 muskies we boated in that area that had been almost dead the 5 days before. So you really never know what you're going to get from one day to the next. So yeah, they can be the fish of 10,000 casts, and they can also be the fish of a lot less casts when all the stars are aligned.
Yeah. Are you picking up other fish along the way? Like, would a pike hit a big muskie lure?
Yeah, that's the most common incidental catch is pike. I've caught a handful of big smallmouth bass on muskie baits too, which is always kind of a surprise to see a smallmouth with a muskie bait T-boned in its mouth. He's got a big appetite when they're attacking those big muskie baits.
Mighty Mouse. So take me through the seasons, Ben. How are you going after muskie, early, mid, late summer, fall? Take us through the seasons if you don't mind.
Sure. Early in the season, it's really dependent on water temperature for where they're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
If the shallow water isn't warm enough, they won't be in the shallow bays. So the kind of magic number that I look for here is, high 60s to 70 degree water temperature. If you've got 70-degree water temperature in the shallow bays, the muskies like that. They like to hang out. They literally, sometimes on a hot sunny afternoon, you'll see them. You'll just see a muskie sitting inches below the surface, just soaking up that heat.
Huh.
If you don't have that warm water, though, they're not going to be in the shallow bays. There's no reason for them to be there. But when that's the case, then it's more, you can get on an open water trolling bite.
Okay.
Which is kind of hard to describe, but they'll just suspend, 10 feet down over 30, 40, 50 feet of water, just, busting schools of bait fish. But when the water is warm enough, early season, it's fun casting bucktails and topwaters and, over top of weeds in shallow bays. And then as the season kind of wears on, they kind of pull out of those early season bays towards more structure, adjacent to deeper basins. And, that's really like late July through August here. And that's really the prime summer casting time, late July through August.
Okay. Heat of the summer then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We throw a lot of big bucktails and topwater baits to fish through the weeds, even a jerk bait, anything with big trebles that gets down, it's hard to fish in the weeds. So we burn a lot of blades and fish a lot of topwater over top of cabbage, and those fish literally rocket right out of the weeds to attack your bait. So that's key in the summer. And then, fall starts this far north, kind of, towards the end of August. Even in late August, you can see the leaves on the underbrush starting to turn. And as that happens, it's a real transition time for muskies. As their summer habitat, the weeds start to die off and they start to leave those areas and make their way towards, more deeper structure, more rock structure. September is a real in-between month where you can still catch fish in the weeds, but you can also catch them throwing, big rubber baits off rock reefs and rock points and stuff like that. September is it's an interesting month because literally everything is in play. Summer strategies to fall strategies.
Oh, wow.
And then as you move into October, like pure fall, that's when we're casting a lot of big rubber baits like Medusas, Bulldogs, big swim baits like Chadzillas and Chaos Poseidons, and primarily targeting rock. And at that time of year, I love casting because it's more interactive, but sometimes, trolling is the ticket, and we do quite a bit of trolling in October, especially into November, basically when it gets too cold to cast, when your line is freezing up from being wet.
Yeah.
Then we troll a lot, and that's late October into November kind of window, and that's kind of how the progression of that goes, from early season, to really generalize things,
Okay, that's good. No, that's perfect. When I think of musky fish, and I can remember as a kid, I used to go to northern Wisconsin as a kid, and I remember going in these bait stores and seeing these gigantic lures, like as big as my arm, and the guy saying, "Oh, those are for musky fishing," and what's the story on how big the lures need to be for musky fishing? Can you get a muskie on smaller jigs and things like that as well?
Sure. I mean, it happens all the time. You hear guys, walleye fishermen or bass fishermen catching muskie on, 3, 4, 5-inch jerk bait, stuff like that, or whatever kind of bait. They will eat smaller stuff, but for the most part, yeah, the average muskie lure is probably 8 to 10 inches long. The biggest trolling bait I have is 14 inches, but on average for a trolling bait, probably 10, 12 inches is pretty normal for for a big trolling bait.
Okay.
Even the bucktails and topwaters are 8-10 inches long.
Okay.
It could be a chore chucking them all day, that's for sure. But that's kind of where modern musky equipment has really changed the game. Longer rods, especially, it makes it easier to cast big baits all day. So that's been the main trend with musky rods is length. Like most rods are 9 foot plus nowadays. It makes baits easier to throw, but it also makes it a lot easier to figure eight at the side of the boat with a long rod. You can make bigger circles and get your bait farther out from the boat.
Right. And that figure eight maneuver is key, right? Like you catch a big percentage of your fish doing that, don't you?
Yeah. It really depends on how proficient, an angler is at figure eighting, but a good figure eighter, I've seen guys who are really good at it, guys who are better than me, who can catch half their fish here figure eighting.
Wow. Yeah, what's a good figure eighter doing? A bad one isn't.
there's several different things that that separate a good figure eighter from a poor one, but to generalize, one of the biggest keys is your transition into the figure eight, right? As you switch from moving the lure with the reel to moving it with your rod, it needs to be a smooth transition. Also, speed, how you use speed. If you slow it down up high on a corner, that's a good spot where a muskie likes to grab them. Things like that. Making big circles as opposed to small circles. Just being steady with your corners, but really the biggest thing is that transition into the figure eight. You're either going to lose the fish's attention right there because you did something wrong, or they're going to stay with that bait. But even the best figure eighters don't catch every fish that follows, right?
Yeah,
I've seen some what I would consider tough figure eights work. It just depends on the fish, but yeah, a good figure eighter will catch half their fish on the figure eight, and it's a rush too. Watching one eat right at your feet. With
oh my gosh,
with nothing more than your 10-inch leader, separating you from a really big fish. It's a rush.
Got to be about like watching the lions eat at the zoo. Just they're right there.
Pretty much, just a white water everywhere.
Oh man, that sounds like a lot of fun.
The guy with the fish just yelling for the net.
Yeah, right. Like you're just standing there in awe. Oh yeah, the net. Better get going on that. So you've named off some of your favorite lures and baits. Would you mind just ticking off some of the other ones that you really like? And then we could put some pictures of these up on my Facebook page, the Destination Angler Podcast Facebook page, after the show.
Yeah, that'd be great. Sure. So, bucktails are very popular everywhere you fish for muskies across their range. Double-bladed bucktails are one of the biggest things. Every muskie fisherman has a bunch of them, ranging from small ones with size 6 blades to big ones with double 12 blades. I use all PDs, bucktails, and spinner baits. One thing I've switched all my baits to is hex blades. They pull easier through the water as opposed to a smooth blade. Like if you're throwing like hex 12s feel more like regular 10s. The hex blades are a lot easier to pull. Top water works great here too. Both prop style, like a top raider or a Lake X, and also like a walk the dog style.
Okay.
Top water works good here, like a Weagle or a Jackpot or a Rabska. Those types of baits for top water they're fun to fish too.
Okay.
And the strikes on walk the dog baits are just violent.
Wow. Do you supply all the baits and lures for people that come up, or do they need to bring their own?
I certainly can. My tackle box is always open for my clients to pick through and choose from. But for the most part, the clients that I get are experienced guys who have, boxes and boxes full of stuff that they have confidence in, and, stuff that they use. And that's one thing every year I learn from my clients, because they'll pull out a bait that they have confidence in, something that I may not have ever had in my box or ever seen sometimes, and it'll work. And I, people always ask me, what do you think about this? What do you think? Do you think this would work? And, I've learned to never say never, right? Because I've seen stuff work that I never would have looked at it and thought, oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, experiment a little bit.
But some of my some staple baits in my box, I've learned about from clients who bring them up, try them, and have success on them.
Yeah, that's great.
We also throw, a lot of rubber in the fall. Big rubber is kind of like the rule of thumb in the fall, like Medusas and Bulldogs, Ratzillas by Waterwolf lures. Those are really good up here in the fall. After rubber, you got to have a dive and rise in your box, like a Seul or a Sledge. Jerk baits, like a 9-inch grandma. There's a perfect example of where, a $30 lure, which is very cheap on the spectrum of musky baits. A 9-inch grandma, everybody should have a few of them in their box. You can cast them, you can troll them, and they're just straight up producers. Hardhead is another jerk bait that I love to fish. It's like a pull and pause. You rip on it, and then when you reel up the slack, the bait pauses and sinks a bit.
Yeah.
I don't fish a ton of glide baits myself, but they have a time and place. And, in the trolling bait game, for me, it's, the explosion of these custom musky baits is really taken over. There's so many talented basement builders, handcrafting musky baits in their basement, literally, and they're works of art, and they're also functional, of course, but, baits like DK50 finders, blue water baits, Trophic 5 baits, BR baits, hose baits. The demand for these things and the prices that some guys are getting for them is insane. Like I've seen musky lures auctioned off for over $1,000.
Really?
Absolutely.
They're works of art. I don't think I'd want to take that fishing.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. Some people don't fish them. They keep them as a collector's item, but some guys fish them, and but it's a really interesting segment of the musky community is these custom bait builders, guys who are making incredible products. I bang everything I own off the rocks on Lock Seul, though I don't have anything that just stays on the wall.
Okay, yeah, good for you. Well, talk to me a little bit about how the importance of line leaders, snaps, swivels when you're fishing for fish of this size.
Right, terminal tackle is huge. I'm not shy about inspecting my clients' terminal tackle before we leave.
Especially if they're using your baits, right?
Right, and it happens all the time. I'll say, okay, let's cut this leader off, and you can use one of mine. Because, high-end components that are designed to handle big fish like this, that's literally what separates you from the fish of a lifetime. There's no sense in traveling all the way up here and putting in all this time and effort and money just to have a leader fail or a clip come open, right?
Right.
The importance of terminal tackle in musky fishing it's huge. It's something that I preach and harp on to guys. It's another little thing, but just having sharp hooks. I always am on guys like, are your hooks sharp? Are your hooks sharp?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will say, "Oh yeah, they're brand new," and I say, "Well, that's how you know they're not sharp if they're brand new."
Is that right?
So I got hook files all over the boat, and that makes such a difference having laser sharp hooks.
Huh. Oh, that's great.
You want to cash in on every bite you get, because if a fish bites, you've done everything right. You're at the right place at the right time with the right bait. So to miss out on that opportunity because of something like a dull hook or a cheap leader, that just can't happen. Those are things you can control, right?
Right. And what as you were talking, I just thought of something else I wanted to ask you. So I know there's not a typical day, but like a good day, like how many follows, how many hookups, how many in the boat is a pretty good day? Maybe not a banner day, but a pretty good day for you.
Right. If we catch, one or two fish, that's a measure of a good day. Anything more, it just keeps getting, better and better from there. But that's kind of what separates us from, other musky fisheries in this area, especially Lake of the Woods, like a good day on Lake of the Woods, you can catch 10, which is unheard of on Lac Seul. Absolutely unheard of. I've caught 6 fish in a day once.
Okay.
Just to put it in perspective.
Right. But you're getting bigger fish at Lac Seul. That's why people come there, right?
Right. The average size is bigger, but the density is less. So it's kind of a trade-off, and I've talked to people, who have inquired about a trip, and, we've reached the conclusion that this isn't the experience they're looking for. Some people, they would rather catch a lot more fish that, aren't necessarily as big. And I'm fine with that. I'm not trying to mislead anyone about what to expect when you come to Lac Seul.
Right.
Because you can, on a good day, you'll have maybe 12 a dozen encounters. It's not very often where you'll raise 0 fish, have absolutely nothing to show for it, but it happens. It happens every year.
Yeah, it's fishing.
That's the way it goes. It comes back to those, comparisons to big game hunting. You can sit on your gear stand all day and not see a buck.
Right. Absolutely. So, just as we're closing up, I wanted to also ask you, we were talking a little bit about water temp. We were talking about barometric pressure. What else goes through your mind as you approach each day in terms of weather, wind, water temps, visibility, other factors, and how does that affect how you're fishing?
One thing that I always look at is the wind, and I do, for the most part, like to fish on wind structure, spots where the wind is blowing in on, as opposed to fishing on the lee side.
Okay.
That's just kind of a real generalization or a rule of thumb that can, help you eliminate a good chunk of water in a day. Is by going with the on wind theory. It's not always the case, but it's a good one. A good one to think about, from the get go. Other things, that really, they affect fish and they also affect fishermen is the moon phases. I am a believer in the moon phases.
Yeah.
And every year, some of my regular clients, when I open up my schedule for the following year, my regular clients book full moon and new moon in July and August right away.
Okay.
They're always the first dates to go. When you're planning a trip months and months ahead, looking at the moon phases can give you a small advantage, but the truth is it comes down to what the conditions are at the time of the trip. Those conditions trump moon phase for sure. Like, I've had incredible trips, in between moon phases when your Seul lunar app says that it's a low activity time. I've had phenomenal trips, and I've also had trips on a moon phase where it just isn't what you expected, right? So you never know. You never know until it comes down to the timing of the trip. And, unfortunately, when you're booking a trip, months and months in advance, there's no way of knowing what you're going to get for conditions. But
of course. Right. Okay. Boy, this has been a great conversation, Ben. I really appreciate you coming on the show and hope everybody got a lot out of this. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
You can check out my website, benbeattieoutdoors.com. It's got my phone number and email on there. Texting is probably honestly the quickest way to get a hold of me. It's 807-738-1114.
Okay, great. Well, we'll post all this information to our show notes, plus pictures of some of those big fish that Ben's been catching up there and the lures he's been talking about on my Facebook page as well. That's the Destination Angler Podcast Facebook page. Our music is by A Brothers Fountain, and you can email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50, that's SHAIGH50 @gmail.com. And please give us a share, like, or follow on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.